you have got to have what's called an independent board. The board must have a majority of disinterested members. These are people who don't have any contracts with this nonprofit. They don't have any close family members that work for the nonprofit. They themselves are not working or making a salary from the nonprofit. Now, can they get paid as board members? Sure, but that's the only way they can get paid as board members. Most of the boards that I have worked with or I've been on have been non-paid, not paying positions. They were volunteer positions.
Jillian, I'm excited about today because we got a question from one of the people in the Last Life Ever Facebook group that I want to ask you about. I hope that's
Okay.
all right. So,
I think that's great.
Melody actually asked us, what does it take to start a charity or something along those lines? What does it take to start a tax exempt charity in the United States? And I don't know very much about it, but I've heard a rumor that you might know a thing or two. Is that true? Do you know anything about that?
I do. I've started a couple of 501c3 charities before, and I have definitely donated to a lot of 501c3 charities, but the process of donating and actually creating your own are two vastly different things. And so we'll just go step by step on what you need to do in order to get that done. So the first thing that I think people, they want to rush into the process of getting the IRS stuff done and getting approved by the IRS. But there's a couple of things you got to do before you can even start that process with the IRS. And the very first thing you need to do is get your mission statement done and understand what your mission actually is. What are you doing? So craft a really good mission statement and in a lot of ways make this your mantra. And you're going to be asked this question of what is your mission multiple times. It's going to be asked differently. It's going to be, what is your purpose? What are you doing? But at the end of the day, that is what your mission statement is. The first thing you want to do is write your mission statement. What is it you're going to do?
So, so
Um,
just so I'm clear on this, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious, but what you're really saying is like, what is that thing that makes you want to do this charity? What is the thing?
why are you even, why should we even consider you to be a charity? If the answer is, I want to open a restaurant so I can get rich, that's not a charitable purpose.
Sure. I
So
mean, and also like why this group? Because I mean, if I just want to donate to a charity, I mean, I could go donate to St. Jude's or the Red Cross or something. Like, why do I need to donate to Jillian's charity? She's
right.
articulate a reason why it makes sense for me to. What are you going to do? What are you doing differently than other people? That kind of stuff. That's what you're talking about.
While I'm writing this mission statement, another thing you really want to consider, because you're going to need it for the IRS, is to really consider writing a business plan. And there's really, I broke it down to a couple of key questions that the IRS asks. The IRS 1023 is a 40-page form that requires you to also put in attachments. One of the things that they ask in the form is, what are you going to do? Right? If they don't mean just what are you going to do, I am going to be a cancer charity is not an appropriate answer. You have to be very specific in what you're going to do. We're going to provide, I'll give an example. One particular organization I used to donate to and do a lot of events for on a regular basis was called the Lazarus Cancer Foundation. And they didn't just, it wasn't cancer research or giving money to cancer patients. What they did was people who had given up hope, or actually hadn't given up hope, but the opposite. They hadn't given up hope, but they were like, they were terminal, close to terminal, or had tried every treatment available that insurance would pay for. They would finance studies, clinical trials. So if you were like, I want to cure my cancer. I am so desperate. I will try any clinical trial, but I can't pay for it. They would pay for it for you. So that was what they did. And then they would have to tell you each activity that they would do. We'll finance clinical trials. We'll send people to med spas, whatever the things they were. So they would have to say what they would do. Who's going to carry out those duties? That's another big thing, is that you have to say who's going to carry it out. And it might not be specific names. In some situations, you do have to say specifically who's going to do what. But in terms of individuals, if you're like a really closely held organization, but it's like the director of marketing is going to be in charge of reaching out to charities, to race organizations, and create opportunities to donate through that's actually how I ended up doing Lazarus Foundation. Was I would run Disney races. Like they have the Princess Half Marathon or the Wine and Dine Half Marathon. And if you bought a bib for one of these races through this organization, the proceeds that were above and beyond the actual price of the bib would go to the organization. And then also you could do fundraising and things like that. So you need to talk about what will you do? Who will do it? Where are you going to do it? What percentage of time are you going to spend on that particular activity? How will things be funded? Like how will certain activities be funded? And how does the activity further the purpose or your mission of the charity? So those are the first things you have to think about. You have to think about your mission statement. What will you do? Who will do it? Where? What percentage of time is each individual activity going to take? How will things be funded? And how does the activity further your purpose? So that's steps one, two,
So it
three, four,
sounds
five, and
like to me,
six.
the first step is very similar to starting a business. You have to understand what it is you're doing and how you're going to do it and who's going to do what. And so you got to put your team together, all that kind of stuff, even before you think of applying for some kind of tax status. So
Exactly. Yes.
once
Yeah.
you get through that, let's say I've come up with this concept. Let's just make up a name. Let's say we call it Make a Wish Foundation. And let's say my idea is I'm going to help people who children who are terminally ill have like life's type experiences. They get to meet
Right.
athletes or go to Hawaii. So I've come up with this idea. I'm not stolen it from anybody. I just came up with it now on the spot, right? So
Sounds like it.
I
Yes.
have this great idea. And let's say I have a whole team of people ready to go. I've got Jillian. She's going to introduce us to all her famous friends, all this stuff figured out. All right. Now that I've done that, and let's say I know there's an IRS jurisdictional issue that we have to concern, but what about state law? Do I have to start with the state? Do I have to decide where I'm organizing? Is that what happens next?
Yeah, I do. But that's actually not what happens. So the next thing I want you to do is to actually make a budget. And what your budget is basically going to be is like a sources and uses table because there
Mhm.
is no profit in a nonprofit, or at least there shouldn't be. So your sources are going to be where's your money going to come from? Are you selling things? Are you raising money through donations? Are you applying for grants? Where do you plan on getting your money from? And then the next part of that is how do you plan on spending that money? Because the IRS wants to know, are you going to literally put all this money to your charitable purpose, which isn't totally reasonable, by the way? Or are you going to put some of it towards or the majority of it towards your charitable purpose, and then the rest of it towards administrative costs? And what are those administrative costs? So,
Question for you there. So I have my imaginary charity that I came up with.
mhm.
Let's say I raise $1 billion tomorrow because I'm amazing and I take donations. Jillian writes me a check for $1 billion. She gets a huge
Okay.
tax write off, right? Can I then pay myself $900 as a salary?
No, the IRS would never do that, right? Because then, and that's the thing. You look at we're going to get to that actually, because they're looking for conflicts of interest. They're looking for less than arm's length transactions, and I actually got that question from the IRS once when I was dealing with a particular entity that I was forming. It was a company that was a for-profit company that we were turning into a nonprofit, and the original owner was going to benefit still because the original owner was taking a salary from the for profit and needed to survive, needed to continue working. And she also owned the property. So we had to make sure that any kind of payments to her, whether it be rent or salary, was at an arm's length transaction through an independent board of directors. And
Uh,
actually, the IRS asked us straight out about that. They wanted to make sure that was completely above board, that she wasn't being unjustly enriched through the
I mean,
auspices of a
that
charity.
make that makes sense to me, right? But I mean, I know that this stuff happens on some level too, because, and I'm not picking on, say, Warren Buffett or whatever. But Warren Buffett has started a charity. I've seen news articles about it. His children aren't gonna inherit very much money from him, but they all have board positions on this charity that I'm sure are compensated in some fashion. Maybe not $1 billion in my ridiculous example, but what you're really saying is there has to be some kind of independent board in between there, some non-biased parties to be making these decisions about what's reasonable.
Yeah, exactly. So once you have the mission statement done, once you get your budget done, once you basically get your business plan done, the next thing you really want to work on is your org chart with roles and compensation for all the people who are going to be involved. Now, I want to make this really clear because there's people out there who might be listening to this and going, but I'm the only one. I'm the one who's starting this charity. And that's fine. You can do that. You can independently by yourself start a charity without actually having a board set. But the intention has to be that you will seat a board, or else you're not going to keep your status. It can't just be you. That cannot be how it is. You have got to have what's called an independent board. The board must have a majority of disinterested members. These are people who don't have any contracts with this nonprofit. They don't have any close family members that work for the nonprofit. They themselves are not working or making a salary from the nonprofit. So they have to be disinterested members of the board. Now, can they get paid as board members? Sure, but that's the only way they can get paid as board members. Most of the boards that I have worked with or I've been on have been non-paid, not paying positions. They were volunteer positions. But you do need an independent board that has a majority of disinterested members, and that means they don't have conflict of interest. That's the next thing you want to think about is what does your board look like? And you can, and then the next thing you can do once you figure out what you want that to look like and who's going to be in what role, who's going to make, who's going to have a salary and who's just going to sit on the board, etc. Then some of your employees can sit on the board. It just has to be a majority, has to be people who are just, that's their only function is to sit on the board and make decisions as a board member. With that being said, once you figure that out and once you figure out what does my board look like, do I have 3 members with 2 disinterested parties and one interested party, or do I have 3 and 5, or however that looks? You figure that out, and then you can go and prepare your bylaws. And these are your rules for your company. This is what your company is going to look like. Now, again, what I will say to you is maybe you're not quite ready for any of this because you don't have any board members or you don't know what to do. But you actually need to still prepare bylaws in order to get this through the IRS. Even if they're proposed, not yet adopted bylaws, you still have to present the IRS with bylaws.
Mm. By the way, before we go any further, I do want to make one observation, and that is we're by no means giving legal advice here. So
That's
before
right.
you file anything with the IRS or start taking money or any of that stuff, make sure you consult with independent advisors. We're just trying to give you an overview, Jillian.
Right, exactly. Yeah, the thing is, yeah, you really, if nothing else, you got to do the next couple of steps that I'm going to talk about. So you at least have to do the next couple of steps I'm going to talk about prior to taking money from anybody. So the next thing you're going to do, you had made mention of the state. You said you knew about the IRS, but you didn't know about the state. And the state is you just need to organize in any old state, whatever state you choose, as a nonprofit entity. And different states do this different ways. They have nonprofit corporations, they have nonprofit LLCs. That is irrelevant in terms of what you choose because it's still a nonprofit entity. Generally speaking, form a nonprofit in most states is really easy and very inexpensive. You fill out what's called articles of incorporation or articles of organization with your respective state. I've done it done it here in Puerto Rico a couple times. I've done it in California. I've done it in Tennessee because we have a foundation, Jeff and I, and that's a relatively easy process. And actually, all this other stuff I talked about, you actually don't even need to create that entity in your state, but you do need it when we get to the next step, which is the most important step, which is getting approved by the IRS.
Okay. And I want to make sure we're aware of the time because we could talk about this for a long time, right? And not
Sir,
cover everything. But to get approved by the IRS, I think you mentioned a form that you said was 40 pages long, the
right.
1023. So is that
Right.
the next step? You have to start working on this 1023 form?
Right. So here's the great thing. Like, actually, I talked about this 1023 form that's 40 pages long. But if you don't think you're going to raise or have income of more than $50,000 in the next 3 years, then you can do something that's called the 1023 EZ, which is w- obviously a lot easier. The funny thing is, I've never actually even filed a 1023 EZ because all of the organizations that I've worked with have always been hopeful of making more than $50,000 every year. You can you can do the 1023 EZ and you actually, I don't even know if there's a filing fee, but you don't have to necessarily get approved by the SEC, I mean, the SEC, excuse me, IRS. The IRS, it's automatically approved once you file. So again, I don't know if there's a fee, but if you believe you're going to raise more than $50,000 each year over the next 3 years, or you're going to have income of exceeding $50,000 each year over the next 3 years, then you do need to do the regular 1023, which is 40 pages long. But everything I've told you so far, with the exception of some things like address, phone number, email address, things like that. All of that stuff has already been created in the steps I gave you previously with the bylaws, the org chart, the mission statement, answering those questions that I said. When you look at this 40-page document, as an organization, you're only going to fill out parts of it. So you really need to read the form very carefully because it's not intended for you to fill out the whole thing. Some parts are for some certain types of charities and other parts are for other types of charities. For example, if you're a religious organization, an education organization, et cetera, then there's different sections that only those types of entities or those entities that have those elements to them are supposed to fill out. So you don't have to actually fill out all 40 pages, but you do need to read it really carefully to make sure you're not only filling out the right sections, but fully answering the questions that they're asking. That's what I always find is that people are like, well, it's just a form. I can fill it out myself. And yeah, that's true. But you really need to make sure that you do a thorough job and an organized job of answering the questions. You're super direct. Like, for example, those questions I gave you before, what will you do? Who will do where, what? You want to enumerate those things and be very clear. We will do the following. We the following people will form the following tasks in just one, two, three. Don't try to like just write a glorious paragraph because that's not helpful to the IRS agent that gets this on their table. They want to be able to read it and check boxes.
This sounds like the advice I give people when they say they can fill out their own patent application. Like, technically, you could, and you have this invention, but you need to know how to describe it. You need to know how to research it and everything. And so, what you're really saying is you've got to follow a systematic approach to presenting the information that they're looking for, or they're going to reject it. They may
Right.
send it back with questions theoretically, but probably they're just going to reject you outright and say,
Okay. Hold on. I want to just tell you where to find this 1023 form. It's not a form you like download from the internet. Actually, what you have to do is you have to establish an account with pay.gov. Don't go to the IRS website. That's not going to help you. You need to go to pay.gov and set up an account from there. And then there you can start the form, and the form is right online. You can save it, you can download it, all of those things. But the way you start it is by going to pay.gov and starting there. So what you're going to do is you're going to start the process on pay.gov with all the information that we have already talked about. You're going to you're going to attach your bylaws. You're going to attach your articles of organization from your state. It may even ask you for a couple of other things, depending on what your company is and what you're doing. And then you're going to pay. Honestly, the number changes all the time. And I don't know how they figure out what the filing fee is. But one time I paid it, it was $800. And the last time I paid it was $660. So who knows? But yeah, since time I paid it was like $600. And I don't think that it's based on anything that you put in the application. I think that number is actually statutory and it's always adjusting. It actually went down. So I don't know, that is. So what you're going to do is you're going to file and you're going to pay. And then what you're going to do is you're going to wait. You're going to wait around. And then the IRS invariably is going to send you comments. I've gotten 1023s through relatively quickly, but I have never gotten through any of them with at least one or two comments from the IRS agent. And comments are basically, they call them comments, but they're basically questions like, for example, one time when I'll just use that example where the founder, we had a for-profit organization, we're turning into nonprofit. They asked a lot of questions about the founder and how is the founder going to be compensated, and did we have any of that in writing? And the answer is we don't have that in writing, but we do know when we do it, it will be an arm's length transaction that will be voted on by the independent board. That was the answer to one of the questions that she had, and this is an acceptable answer. The big thing about answering the comments is being thorough, direct, and honest. And if you're those things, unless you're telling them you're honestly going to do the thing, you will get approved.
Cool. Right on. Okay, I'm going to summarize what we've covered so far, and then I'm going to ask you a couple of follow-up questions, right? So
Okay.
start with your mission statement, then your business plan, get really clear about your org chart, all that kind of stuff. Then pick your state, whatever jurisdiction that is, get your organization filed in the state, and then go to pay.gov and set up an account to do a 1023 or a 1023 easy, depending on your situation,
Right.
and answer all these questions. Go through the submit, wait for a while, and then answer their comments, whatever those are. And let's say you get through all that, and now they say, okay, congratulations, Jillian, you have a new 501c3. What now? What do I do next?
You go out and you run your charity. You can start doing events and taking money.
Like, do I
Actually,
get an
taking
E? I
money.
have to go get an EIN and like open bank
Oh my
accounts and
God.
stuff like that.
Actually, get an EIN, tax ID. Thank you. It's that. Before you go to pay.gov, you need to get the tax ID number. You're going to go to the IRS's website, irs.gov, and get an EIN there. You can get it right online. And that's your tax identification number. I just totally forgot to mention it.
Well, it's a very simple process for
It is
people
a
who haven't
very simple
done it
process.
before. irs.gov, click on apply for an EIN, follow the directions. It takes about 15 minutes and they issue it on the spot if you click the right
Yeah.
buttons. Otherwise, they'll mail it to you. You get it in 3 or 4 days. But if you
Right.
click the right buttons, you can just download it right on the
Yeah,
spot.
just screw that up. Just start over and get another one. But so
Yeah,
run
well,
it like
also, if you
the way.
screw that up, you probably shouldn't be running a charity. Let's
Yeah,
be
I'm
honest.
so bad.
Can't handle answering very simple questions on the IRS website. You probably should not
Yeah.
be trying to operate a business or a charity.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But yeah, I mean, honestly, and then the thing you want to do after is there's a couple things you do have to do after every year. You need to fill out what's called a 990. And if you have not had a lot of income, you can do a 990N, I think it's called. That's one charity that I work with right now. It's a anti-human trafficking charity. It mostly operates out of Mozambique, but we do have some American donations. So our American donations go through our American nonprofit, and our American nonprofit doesn't actually get a lot of donations every year. Like I'm one of the few donors, frankly. So our donations for the American nonprofit are under 50,000. So I can fill out what's called the 990N, and the 990N it's called the postcard 990, and you can just do it right on irs.gov. But you want to make sure you get that done every year. That's basically filing your taxes.
Okay, so
Though you're
there's
not
no
paying
tax
taxes.
return, but there is
No.
this 990 form that's essentially the equivalent of a tax return. It's just you don't owe taxes because it's a non-taxable thing.
Right. And then if you're a bigger entity, you would do the 990 and file that accordingly. And the 990 that you would do, there are circumstances where a nonprofit sometimes has a for-profit function in it. And the 990 allows you to report that. And then you would pay taxes on the for-profit
Mm.
portion and not pay taxes on the non.
Got it. All right. Well, all right. So I think that's a good summary of what you need to do. Obviously, people need to get legal advice and get the right advisors in place. But is there anything else that you want to add to the process? Because it sounds come up with the plan, build out the team, file the right forms with the state and with the government, and then stay on top of it as you go forward and do your annual reporting requirements. Other than
Yeah.
that, is there anything else that you think is important for people to think about before they make that decision to start a nonprofit?
Yeah. The biggest thing I would want people to think about is that you really want, the makeup of your board is important, but the most important person, in my opinion, when it comes to nonprofits on your board is the secretary. You just want to make sure that you have somebody who's really good at keeping records, keeping notes. That if there's any decisions that they have the consents and the board resolutions written up soon after the board meeting's over, and is keeping minutes of the board meetings so that you have those records. Because if the IRS or any donors come a knocking and want to know this information, you have it ready.
All right. Well, there you have it. So, Melody, thank you for asking the question. We made this entire episode of the Last Life Ever podcast just for you, but I do think it will be beneficial to many people that follow us in the world of the interwebs. So, Jillian, before we wrap up, is there anything you want to remind the audience?
I just want to remind everybody to live the best version of your last life ever.
Okay, and before I end this recording, I want to add one editorial at the very end. Thank you for that, Jillian. That is how we end the show. So the show is officially over. People can stop listening if they don't want to hear me ramble. But I want you to hold up what you have there. What
What? Yes. This is
there's
our brand new quarterly
Yeah,
planner.
so here's a little advertisement for the Extraordinary Life. You can't really see it very well. Extraordinary Life Planner, which is available for only like $10 on
10
Amazon.
bucks.
I
And
think
it's
we make 4
cute.
cents if you buy it. I'm exaggerating a little, but it's less than $1. But you can get it delivered if you have Amazon Prime for $10 to you right
10
now.
bucks.
Be
It's
there in a couple of
so
days.
good. It's so good. It gives you directions on how, like, I carry this thing around with me everywhere. I mean, I made it and I still carry it around with me everywhere. You put your quarterly vision, you have habit tracking, then you
Yep,
have the
so
daily planner. So
it's a
good.
fantastic planner. I'm excited to get mine. I ordered mine just the other day. It's supposed to come today, actually. So later today, I will have mine in my hands. Maybe it's
Nice.
already at my house, but I'm excited about that. And also, be sure to stay tuned because very soon we're going to release information about our exclusive to people who hear about it. If you don't hear about it, you can't go. Goal setting retreat, which is going to be in Puerto Rico in December of this year, 2024. So if you're listening to it and it is not yet December of 2024, you should track us down and sign up for the goal setting retreat because that is going to be amazing as well. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time.